Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation at Willamette Falls. It is good to be together. I invite you to take a moment and find a chalice or a candle in your own home to light with us as we light our chalice together. We gather together today in spiritual community. Whoever you are, wherever or whatever you come from, you are welcome here, where we are inspired to spiritual growth, where we are invited into connection and inspired to spiritual growth. Let us leave this time together, refreshed anew, ready to ignite action for justice in the wider world. Our opening words this morning are from Sabanfu Some, who writes, "Community is the spirit, the guiding light of the tribe, whereby people come together in order to fulfill a specific purpose, to help others fulfill their purpose, and to take care of one another. Come, let us worship together." Our opening hymn this morning is "Come Sing a Song with Me."
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind, and I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find, and I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know your mind, and I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find, and I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind, and I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find, and I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know your mind, and I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find, and I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Our time for all ages. Today is a story called A Town Called Driftwood by Aaron McEmorus. And Aaron writes that there was once a beautiful city called the City of Sand, which rested alongside the wide, wet river. In the surface of its still waters were reflected the incredible buildings of the Sanders. The Sanders, as you might expect, sculpted everything out of sand. But they dyed the sand all the different colors of the rainbow. There was red and orange and yellow and green and blue and indigo and violet. With their top secret glue, they shaped and molded the sand. And the city of sand was gorgeous. Towers and walls glided to the sky in colorful sandscapes. Sand sculptures of ducks flew. Water buffalo made out of sand grunted, and sound harps seemed to play themselves as the centuries rolled by. The Sanders were artists. They were great artists, but they weren't terribly kind people. Not to each other, and certainly not to the dusters, who lived among the ruins on the high, dusty hill outside of town. The dusters rarely tried to make anything beautiful because they were too busy surviving, and they were very good at that. They could build a house out of just about anything. It was said that if they had to, they could even squeeze water out of a stone. For as long as anyone could remember, the Sanders lived by the river, building their great sand buildings, while the dusters did their very best to survive in the dirt. The Sanders looked down on the dusters, of course, for being so dusty and simple. Dusters weren't even allowed to set foot in the city of sand because they might get it dirty. But one year, just as the harvest festival returned, the river began to rise. The waters rose and rose for no reason that anybody could see. Not even the oldest sander or duster had ever seen the river rise like that. At first, the Sanders found it amusing, but then as the waters lapped at the sand walls at the edge of town, their amusement turned to fear. And then, as the water began to spill over the edges of the sand walls like water from an overfull bathtub, that's when the Sanders discovered something that they had never wished to know. And that is that the secret glue they used to hold the sand together dissolved in water. Suddenly, the whole city, that gorgeous, sparkling rainbow city with the water buffalo and the swans, all melted away. Just like a sandcastle collapses when the tide comes in. The Sanders slept in the open for the very first time that night. When they woke up in the morning, the water had receded, but their city was gone, their whole city. Where the river's edge had been rimmed with beautiful gardens and delicate walls of sand, there remained nothing but a huge, unsightly pile of driftwood. The Sanders wept. "What will become of us?" they cried. From above, the dusters looked on, their faces unreadable. Some of them pointed down at the Sanders city, and they held whispered conferences with each other. Then, in a large bunch, they came down the hill toward the devastated city. The Sanders didn't know what to expect. After all, they had not been kind to the dusters, ever. Now, what were the dusters going to do? But instead, the dusters quickly divided into work parties by the riverside, and they pulled apart the tangled driftwood and sorted it by shape and size. Sanders may be snobs, but they do admire cleverness. And they looked on in amazement as the clever dusters began to shape that seemingly useless driftwood into simple, sturdy homes. They watched carefully, and soon they started helping out, learning as they went. When the sun sank in the sky, they worked on, straight on through the night by starlight. They worked the next day, too, all together, dusters and sanders alike, caught up in the thrill of building something new as a rebuilt city began to rise on the floodplain. As the buildings rose sturdily, the sanders came into their own, teaching the dusters how to carve and decorate the world so that it wasn't just sturdy, but it was beautiful. The dusters were great at building, but they'd never paid much attention to beauty. But they had so much fun that they kept right on building even after there were enough houses for all the sanders. They finished just as the harvest moon began to rise in the east. The dusters brought down all the food they had, and they threw a great harvest feast. Their foods were not spicy or delicate like the fancy foods the sanders loved, but all their spices had been pulled away by the water. And an empty stomach and good company can make even the simplest food taste divine. All together they feasted on seeds and roots and berries and pancakes made of groundnuts, as stories and songs passed between the two groups of people through the night air. The dusters never left. It felt right to be there all together. And so they became one people, and they named their new city Driftwood so that they would always remember where they came from. Have you ever built anything with someone else? Maybe something better than you could have imagined building by yourself? Did it feel good to work together with someone else and create something new? We have chances to do that here. It's good to see you today. Now is the time when we would generally take up a collection. I invite you to go to UUCWF and make a donation to the congregation if you would like. You're welcome to make a donation to the Hope Food Pantry or one of our other special collections. And we always accept pledges by check if you'd like to mail them into the office. I did not receive many joys and sorrows today. And so I have one, but I would like to invite you to write your joys and sorrows in the chat if you would like. The one that I did receive was from Charles Gallia, who notes with sorrow, Dr., Professor, and Representative Mitch Greenlick died on Friday. And Charles is feeling a personal sorrow for the loss of a mentor and role model, and for the loss to the state of his perseverance, integrity, and advocacy for moral justice, including equitable universal health care access. I'm hearing a sign to be patient with audio. I don't know if you can hear me now. If you can, you are welcome to type joys or sorrows into the comments, and I will put a stone in our collective cup. Nice. So Mary says that this week Jerry and their 9-year-old foster child built the best lemonade stand in the world that the child completely designed. So yay. Are there more joys or sorrows today? Shannon says that her daughter, who is a senior at Oregon City High School, was adopted by her friend Christy, who has created a beautiful garden for her. That's wonderful. have a huge joy today that my daughter Mika graduated from Mount Holyoke this weekend. I am so grateful for some folks from church who came by and left flowers and balloons and signs and cards. This morning before I came into church, I got to watch the 5-minute commencement video that was created for the class of 2020. I cried lots of mom tears, and I'm so very proud of her. Samantha says that the Wolf family celebrated 13 years of marriage. Congratulations, Samantha. And Holly says that her ankle surgery seems to be a success. That's wonderful news. Yay. Okay. We will pour our community water in here. This is something that they do in the religious education classes here. Everyone puts in stones of joy or sorrow, and then we surround them all with the love of community. Will you pray with me? Spirit of life and love, we are grateful to be getting through this together. We are grateful for milestones and thresholds, for new experiences and new opportunities, for the generosity of community showing up, for mentors and teachers and friends. May we ever be grateful. Blessed be, and amen. Our reading today is from Starhawk. She writes, "We are all longing to go home to some place we have never been. A place half remembered and half envisioned, we can only catch glimpses of from time to time. Community. Somewhere there are people to whom we can speak with passion without having the words catch in our throats. Somewhere a circle of hands will open to receive us, eyes will light up as we enter, voices will celebrate with us whenever we come into our own power. Community means strength that joins our strength to do the work that needs to be done. Arms to hold us when we falter, a circle of healing, a circle of friends, somewhere where we can be free." I invite you to sing our doxology together. It is Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. The shape of justice, roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
As the parent of a daughter born in the very early 2000s, I cannot hear "We're all in this together" without picturing a high school gymnasium full of very clean-cut teenagers wearing red and white, singing and dancing to a cheery song about diversity making us stronger. It is High School Musical. But a friend and colleague, the Reverend Joanna Fontaine Crawford, posted on her blog recently that the situation we're in is really more like Tom Hanks in Castaway. At first, we thought we'd be rescued quickly. Staying home was kind of novel. We made an SOS in stones on the beach and figured out how to gather coconuts. But pretty soon we realized that this rescue was going to take a lot longer than we'd anticipated, or at least hoped for. Joanna suggests that maybe it's time to assess our resources and repurpose those for the needs of our new life. She has practical suggestions about clearing out more room for pantry staples and making better use of your seldom used dining room, maybe repurposing it for homework or crafts or puzzles. In her house, she took the loft, which had previously held long outgrown toys, and turned it into an exercise room, which better serves her family of teens and young adults. It is a good thing to think about, and I encourage you to do so. And while you're assessing your resources and repurposing your space, I want to encourage you to remember what may be your most important resource yet: your community. I know that many of us are disappointed that the Unitarian Universalist Association is suggesting that we prepare for a solid year of online religious services. It hurts me too. And it is the best decision that we know how to make right now. It is the decision that best fits our values of care and compassion and justice for all, of caring for folks who have greater needs, of being inclusive, of being the church that we are called to be. We are called to be the church that welcomes everyone. We are called to be the church that welcomes folks of different beliefs and different races and different ethnicities, different sexual orientations and different genders. We value people of different abilities. It would be disingenuous if we gathered together only when those of us who are young and healthy would be safe. We will get through this next year together. I too am hungry to see your faces in person. As we plan for this virtual church to go on for longer than we'd originally hoped, I imagine that we will become more creative over time. A few people from the congregation came to my house yesterday to celebrate Mika's graduation in a safe and socially distanced manner. We wore masks. We stayed at least 8 or 10 feet away from each other. Not everyone was there at the same time. But there was still something very powerful about seeing one another in 3D. Perhaps as time goes on, we will find ways to gather safely in small groups outside over the summer. Perhaps I will start driving by people's homes and talking to you while you sit on your porch and I sit in my car. We will figure out ways to make this work. The ability to make long-term plans will enable us to find ways to be more creative. We will learn how to create new possibilities. Part of that is learning what it is that we really miss, what it is that we are longing for in this time. How do we find ways to make that happen in ways that are still safe? I watched Barack Obama's commencement speech last night. He spoke online to the class of 2020, and he gave some good advice that fits not just high school graduates, but all of us. And he kept it under 8 minutes, which I think might be a record for him. He said, "Don't be afraid. America has gone through tough times before and has come through stronger." His second piece of advice was, do what you think is right. Doing what feels good or what is easy or convenient, that's how little kids think. I thought that was good advice for all of us right now. What is right isn't easiest right now, but it is important to keep being safe. And his final advice was exactly what we're talking about today. He said, build a community, because no one does great things by themselves. If we're going to heal this earth, if we are going to solve a pandemic, we will need to work together. Right now, that building a community and working together looks smaller and more intimate than it perhaps used to. There are wonderful stories out there about people getting to know their neighbors better. It's happening for me. When getting out means walking in your own neighborhood, I am seeing that people are talking to their neighbors more. We're staying further apart, which is good, but we are talking more. It's a funny combination. We're avoiding one another on the sidewalk, but we're actually saying hello more. I remember when I lived in New York City in the early 1990s. New Yorkers are famous for not talking to each other. In a city with many people in such a small space, folks often build a bubble of privacy around themselves and don't make eye contact with strangers. But what I experienced is that if you give them a context, they are happy to break that bubble. Anything from unusual weather to a really strange occurrence, it will get anyone talking. And my goodness, being in quarantine is a context for people. My friend and colleague, the Reverend Jordan Nelson Long, wrote a long Facebook post last night. She was walking in her neighborhood and spoke to a man on his porch who often saw her running. They exchanged the usual chit-chat, and he had bought many, many, many pepper plants and offered her some. Now, like some other folks, one of the activities that Jordan has taken on in quarantining is gardening, something that she had never done before, and she happened to already have a whole bunch of pepper plants. And she wrote about a legal term called consideration. It usually means cash, but basically it means that you have some skin in the game, that you are trading something of value for something you want. It's how most exchanges work. But on her way home, Jordan said that she kept wishing she'd accepted a purple pepper. She wrote, "I passed on my neighbor's offer automatically, unthinkingly, because I didn't imagine I had anything in return to give. I didn't make a deal because of what I couldn't bring to the table. And in that moment, I forgot how neighbors and neighboring and neighborhoods work, how we abide in the care of one another, and how we are meant to be." Consideration. It's easy to miss what it is. It's ourselves. It's our willingness. It's our mutual promise that we are both still going to be here tomorrow and next week and next year. In community, we give and receive out of the promise of our abiding presence, and also from a deeper well. What we put on the line in community, at least sometimes, is not fair price, but its sheer opposite. Our assent to owe one another our willingness to swallow our pride and not make it even, our abandonment of the futile attempt to live fully independent of one another. We agree, in consideration to our neighbors, to be tied to a shared fate. This is the world that I want to live in. A world of neighborhood buy-nothing groups, where folks give and receive just because they can. A world where we take care of our neighbors by staying home and wearing our masks, but we realize the deep, deep human need for connection, and so we find ways to do that safely. A world where we can imagine new ways of being that don't leave anybody behind. A world where we learn from this pandemic, and instead of getting smaller and more paranoid like we did after September 11th, we realize that we can do without, and that what we deeply need is to find ways to create a more equitable future for all of us. The only thing I know for sure, my friends, is that we cannot do it alone. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Because we are preparing for the annual meeting today, there are a whopping 5 people in the sanctuary, which is more than we have ever had before. And I have to tell you right now that Greg's sigh after the Blessed Be and Amen is probably the most feedback that I've had preaching in real time in a couple of months. Oh, how I have missed that. I invite us all to take a deep breath, a sigh together, if you will, to sink into the silence of your own hearts, knowing that we are connected, my friends. I invite you to join us in our closing hymn, We Gather Together.
We sing now together our song of thanksgiving, rejoicing in good which the ages have wrought, for life that enfolds us and helps and heals and holds us and leads sing of the prophets, the teachers, the dreamers, designers, creators, and workers and seers, our own lives expanding, our gratitude commanding. Their deeds have made immortal their days and their years. We sing of community now in the making, in every far continent, region, and land, with those of all races, all times and names and places. We pledge ourselves in covenant firmly to stand.
We will extinguish the chalice from our service and relight it again in just a moment for our annual meeting. But we extinguish this chalice and this worship service together. As we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment, these we carry in our hearts until we are together again. As you metaphorically go from this place, because I strongly encourage you not to go far, carry the warmth of community with you. Know that even if you are alone in your living room, you are not alone. We are never alone. Go in peace and go in love, my friends, and stay and do the work of this beloved community. Blessed be, and amen.